picture for a second just the absolute chaos of a live rock concert.
Oh, yeah. Like the ultimate sensory overload.
Exactly. You've got these towering walls of amplifiers pushing out, deafening waves of distortion.
Right. And blinding strobe lights flashing in every conceivable direction.
Cutting right through the smoke, plus tens of thousands of screaming fans pressing against the barricades. It's an environment defined by maximum volume, maximum output, and just relentless external stimulation.
It really is.
Now, I want you to take that image, hold it in your head, and put it right next to its absolute opposite, a completely silent room.
Just total quiet.
Right. A single person sitting on a cushion, absolutely still. Their eyes are closed, their posture is rigid, and they're focusing on, well, absolutely nothing except the tiny, almost imperceptible sensation of air moving in and out of their nose.
I mean, that is about as extreme of a contrast as you can possibly get in human experience.
It really is.
You've got this explosion of external, uncontrolled energy on one side, and then a complete, highly disciplined withdrawal into the internal on the other.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by our resident expert to explore this exact contrast.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
So on the surface, those two worlds should never intersect, right? They seem mutually exclusive. But when the Japanese music and culture platform MMR, which stands for Monumental Movement Records, when they dug into this paradox in a pretty fascinating January 2026 article, they found something staggering.
They really did. It's wild.
Yeah. For some of the most successful musicians on Earth, that silent room isn't just like a quirky wellness retreat. It is the literal engine powering the deafening stadium.
Yeah, the article's called The Sound of Music and Awareness, the journey of musicians who practiced Vipassana meditation.
Right. And our mission today is to figure out exactly how world-class musicians are using this specific, highly rigorous form of mental discipline to unlock their creativity. And more importantly, what you can learn from their inner journeys to improve your own focus in a world that, just never stops screaming for your attention.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get into the rock stars and the recording studios, we need to understand the tool they're actually using. So what exactly is Vipassana?
Right.
Because reading through the source material, it becomes immediately clear that this is not about kicking back on the couch, lighting a candle, and listening to whale sounds.
Oh, far from it. It's
Well-
actually a highly active, highly demanding, and honestly often grueling mental exercise.
Grueling is a good word for it.
Yeah. The word Vipassana itself translates to seeing things as they are.
Not how we wish they were.
Exactly. Not how we wish they were, not how we fear they might be in the future, but reality exactly as it presents itself in the present moment.
Okay, so where does it come from?
Well, it's deeply rooted in the Buddhist tradition, dating back thousands of years. But what the MMR article points out, and this is really crucial for understanding why a modern record producer or like a touring musician would care about it, is that today it's practiced globally as a universal, completely non-religious technique.
So you don't have to become a monk.
No, not at all. You don't have to adopt a specific belief system. You don't burn incense or chant. It's essentially a mechanical, neurological process for your brain.
So walk me through the actual mechanics of that process. Like if I sit down on that cushion right now, what is happening on a biological or psychological level?
So the core practice is almost deceptively simple. You sit still and you carefully observe your breathing and your bodily sensations.
Just the physical feelings.
Right. That's your anchor. But the real work begins, like maybe 30 seconds later. As you sit there, thoughts, anxieties, memories, emotions, they're all going to start bubbling up.
Oh yeah, my brain never stops.
Right. Your brain's default mode network kicks in. Normally, when a stressful thought arises, your amygdala, which is the fear and emotional reaction center of your brain, it basically hijacks your nervous system.
Right, you feel the anxiety and your body physically reacts, your heart rate spikes, your chest tightens.
Exactly. But the practice of Vipassana is actively engaging your prefrontal cortex, the logical, observing part of your brain, to recognize those thoughts and emotions as they naturally flow through you, but without reacting to them.
Okay, wait, so you just watch them happen?
Yes, you don't fight the anxiety, you don't judge yourself for having the thought, you simply observe it as a temporary physical sensation, and you forcefully return your focus back to the breath.
Huh. If you think about it, that is exactly like clearing the cache in a web browser.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right, because when your computer gets incredibly sluggish, it's usually because there are like 100 background tabs open.
Yeah, temporary files clogging up the RAM.
Yeah. Exactly. And the processor is overheating trying to manage tasks you aren't even actively looking at, but you hit clear cache. That invisible background noise is wiped out, and suddenly the entire system runs faster and smoother.
That's so true.
It sounds like Vipassana is basically a biological mechanism for identifying all those background emotional tabs, like the argument you had yesterday, or the anxiety about tomorrow's meeting, and just letting them close.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. The source text actually notes that the primary goal is self-observation and purifying the mind.
Purifying the mind.
Right. You're cultivating a balanced mental state by literally training your nervous system not to be hijacked by every passing thought. You're rewriting the automatic reflex that says, I feel an emotion, therefore I must react to it.
But I have to push back on this a little bit, specifically because we're talking about musicians here.
Okay, lay it on me.
Isn't music fundamentally about expressing intense, sometimes overwhelming emotion? I mean, we have this deeply ingrained cultural trope of the tortured artist.
Oh, for sure. The angst-ridden rocker.
Yeah. The person who uses their internal chaos, their heartbreak, and their anger as fuel for their art. If you are constantly clearing the cache, quieting the mind, stabilizing your emotions, doesn't that actually kill the creative spark? Don't you just become, emotionally flat?
What's fascinating here is that the MMR article reveals the exact opposite to be true. It's a completely counterintuitive finding.
Really?
Yeah. Quieting that internal noise doesn't numb you, doesn't make you flat. It actually drastically heightens your concentration and deepens your creativity.
I assume that's because if you're obsessing over, say, a mistake you made in the first verse of a song, or you're worrying about what the critic in the back row thinks, you aren't actually present to play the chorus.
Precisely. You're mentally time traveling.
Yeah.
You're anywhere but in the music.
Wow.
Think about what it takes to actually play music at a mastery level. It requires incredible microscopic sensibilities regarding rhythm, breath, timing, and deep listening.
Right.
If your mind is cluttered with the general noise of ego and anxiety, you aren't fully present to hear the subtle nuances of the sound you're creating. By removing the static, you increase the resolution of your reality. You feel the rhythm more deeply.
You hear the empty space between the notes.
Exactly. You aren't turning down the volume on your emotions, you're turning down the volume on the static, so the actual music comes through clearer.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the article moves from this abstract theory directly into arguably the most surprising case study you could imagine. We're looking at Rivers Cuomo.
Yes. The frontman, lead singer, and principal songwriter of Weezer.
Right, the massive American alternative rock band. We're talking multi-platinum albums, sold-out arenas, generation-defining anthems.
And when you look at the stereotypical rock star lifestyle, especially coming out of the massive stratospheric success Weezer experienced in the 90s and early 2000s, the cultural expectation is pure excess.
Oh, absolutely. It's parties, it's chaos, and eventually it's burnout.
But the reality for Cuomo went in a completely different direction. According to the source material, following that initial wave of global success, the pressure was immense.
I can only imagine.
Cuomo was actively seeking mental stability. He needed a profound creative boost and a sustainable way to navigate the sheer weight of his industry. So in 2003, acting on advice from the legendary music producer Rick Rubin.
Oh, Rick Rubin. He's famous for bringing a very zen-like, stripped-down approach to the recording studio.
Exactly. So on Rubin's advice, Cuomo began practicing Vipassana.
And he didn't just dabble in it either, right? Like, he didn't just download a meditation app.
No, not at all. The level of dedication the MMR article outlines is staggering.
Yeah, listen to this regimen, because for anyone who hasn't encountered this, the article states he has participated in numerous 10-day meditation courses.
Which is a psychological marathon.
It really is. It involves complete silence, no talking, no reading, no writing, no looking at your phone, no eye contact with the other people in the room. You are just meditating for hours on end every single day for 10 days lead.
It forces you to sit alone with your own mind, without any of your usual escape mechanisms. When the anxiety hits or the boredom becomes physically painful, you can't just scroll social media.
You can't distract yourself with a conversation.
Right. You're trapped in the room with your own nervous system, and you have to learn how to observe it without panicking.
Just imagine trying to fit 2 hours of unmoving stillness into your day-to-day. I mean, we complain about not having time to answer a text message. And here is a globally touring rock star carving out 2 hours daily just to observe his breath.
Yeah, the article states that he publicly confirmed he practices seated meditation for about 2 hours every single day.
But then there's a detail in the MMR piece that really stopped me in my tracks. Following his early meditation experiences, in order to establish his self-insight and his values, Cuomo instituted a strict 3-year vow of celibacy as a personal discipline.
Yet that specific detail unlocks a massive insight into the nature of discipline and creative freedom.
It really does.
I mean, here is a person with immense fame, in a profession famous for indulgence, with access to literally anything he could possibly want, actively choosing extreme monastic restraint.
Why go to that extreme, though? It feels almost like self-punishment.
Well, it's actually the ultimate form of stress testing your own operating system. In the Buddhist framework where Vipassana originates, human suffering and distraction are driven by two constant forces: craving and aversion.
Craving and aversion, okay.
Right. We are constantly chasing pleasurable sensations, dopamine hits, validation, physical pleasure, and we're constantly running away from unpleasant ones. By instituting a strict personal discipline like a 3-year vow of celibacy, Cuomo was aggressively confronting his own cravings. He was capping his impulses.
So, by removing all the massive superficial dopamine hits that come with being a famous rock star, his brain was forced to find stimulation and joy in the subtle nuances of his work again.
Exactly.
He restricted his physical impulses so his creative freedom could actually expand.
That is the profound, really deep insight of his journey. And the MMR article notes that this directly impacted his output.
Yeah, by the time Weezer was in their 2005 production period, Cuomo was explicitly referencing this meditation experience in his lyrics and his background process.
And the piece reports that as of the 2010s, he was still actively continuing this intense practice. It fundamentally reshaped his approach to his craft because he was no longer writing from a place of reactive emotion.
He was writing from a place of deep, sustained observation.
Exactly.
And you can see this high-resolution reality play out in the most unlikely environments. Because if you're listening to this, you might be tempted to think, all right, Weezer is great, but Rivers Cuomo has always been known as a highly eccentric, deeply analytical guy. Maybe this is just a quirky, one-off Western rock star thing.
Right. It's easy to dismiss it as an outlier.
Yeah, but the MMR article dismantles that assumption entirely by taking us across the globe. We're introduced to Omid Lotfi Kamkar, an Iranian classical musician.
This is such a vital inclusion in the source material. Kamkar began his musical journey at a very young age, and the text explicitly notes that he has been practicing Vipassana meditation since 1997.
The timeline there is incredible. The article references his practice continuing into the 201X timeline. That means Kamkar has balanced a highly demanding performance career with nearly 20 years of daily Vipassana practice.
It's amazing.
Think about the massive gulf between these two artists. You have an American alternative rock frontman wielding a distorted electric guitar, playing power chords in Los Angeles arenas. Then you have an Iranian classical musician playing traditional acoustic instruments.
Completely different worlds.
We are talking about completely different cultures, different languages, and entirely different musical structures. Classical Middle Eastern music requires an intricate, microscopic focus on complex rhythms and microtones that is vastly different from Western pop rock. Yet both of these men are utilizing the exact same mental tool to achieve mastery in their respective fields.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves that the fundamental mechanics of human performance are universal.
Yeah.
It does not matter if you're playing a Fender Stratocaster or a Persian classical instrument. Underneath the cultural differences, the human hardware is exactly the same.
So true.
Both disciplines require a flawless baseline of focused breathing. Both require an internalized, unbreakable sense of rhythm. And both require immense mental clarity to execute complex physical movements with your hands while remaining deeply emotionally connected to the sound in real time.
And because Vipassana directly trains the neural pathways responsible for focus and non-reaction, it basically acts as a unifying technology for the human mind.
Exactly.
The MMR article actually provides a brilliantly clear 6-step conceptual model of how this entire process integrates. It maps out exactly how sitting silently on a cushion transforms into a better song or a better performance.
The beauty of this 6-step model is that it tracks perfectly with both Cuomo's and Kamkar's journeys.
Okay, let's go through. What's step 1?
Step 1 is meditation basics. This is the foundation. It's Cuomo committing to his 2 hours a day, or Kamkar dedicating 20 years to the cushion.
Right, just putting in the reps.
Exactly. Then step 2 is attention and awareness. This is where the practitioner starts noticing the incredibly subtle data points they used to ignore. The feeling of the breath on the upper lip, the slight tension in the forearm.
Which naturally triggers step 3, emotional stability. Because once you increase your awareness to notice all that subtle physical data, you simultaneously start noticing your emotional reactions. You
Yes.
realize, oh, I'm feeling impatient or I'm feeling frustrated with this chord progression. But because of the training, your prefrontal cortex overrides the amygdala. You don't spiral, you don't smash your guitar or quit the session.
And that emotional stability is the absolute prerequisite for step 4, which is improvement of concentration.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, when you're no longer wasting massive amounts of cognitive energy fighting your own internal frustrations, your ability to stay locked into a single task skyrockets.
Well,
Which leads directly into step 5, deepening of creativity. A stable, highly concentrated mind is no longer afraid of making mistakes. It can access deeper, more novel connections. It can explore bizarre new musical ideas because the fear of failure isn't shutting down the process prematurely.
which culminates in step 6, the final output, improvement of musical quality. The end result is better improvisation, more insightful songwriting, and a live performance where the artist is completely effortlessly grounded in the moment.
Exactly.
If you think about it, this 6-step model is essentially an audio mixing board for the human brain.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. If you plug a microphone into a mixer, the audio signal travels through a series of different stages before it ever hits the main stadium speakers. If you have a bunch of static, hum, and interference at the very beginning of the chain, let's call that a lack of attention and awareness, and you don't EQ it out right away, every subsequent stage of the mixer is just going to amplify that static.
Absolutely.
By the time that signal reaches the master output, which is the musical quality, it's just going to be loud, distorted noise. Vipassana is a way of EQing out the mental static at the absolute earliest stage of the signal chain, so only the pure music gets amplified.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism. You are cleaning up the signal at the source. And what is most vital for anyone listening to understand is that while this MMR article focuses specifically on world-class musicians, this 6-step flowchart is completely universal. Substitute musical quality in step 6 with whatever your daily output is.
Exactly. You don't need to be headlining a festival or playing classical Iranian music for this to apply to your life today.
Maybe your master output is prepping for a high-stakes corporate meeting. Maybe you're a developer writing thousands of lines of code and you need unbreakable focus. Or maybe your output is simply trying to be a more patient, present parent when you walk through the door after a stressful commute.
Yeah, the biological mechanism remains the same. Seeing things as they are stabilizes your emotions, prevents your amygdala from reacting blindly to stress, and directly leads to a higher quality output in whatever task you're engaged in.
It really does.
So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at the whole picture presented in this deep dive into the MMR article, the major takeaway is that Vipassana isn't a passive retreat from the world. It is a profound, incredibly active way to face deep truths about yourself through relentless self-observation.
Yes, exactly.
For musicians operating at the absolute pinnacle of their industries, like Rivers Cuomo and Omid Lotfi, it translates into unparalleled focus and immense creative depth. It's the tool that allows them to survive the crushing pressures of their industry, confront their own cravings, and elevate their art. And for you, it offers a tested mechanical blueprint for navigating an increasingly chaotic, information-overloaded world, simply by learning how to observe reality without instantly reacting to it.
And, while the fully documented list of mainstream musicians who have publicly discussed practicing this specific rigorous form of Vipassana is still relatively small, the intersection highlighted in this article is a critical trend to watch.
Oh, for sure.
The music industry is notorious for burning out its brightest talents. As artists continue to search for sustainable ways to manage the pressure of fame while accessing deep creativity, the bridge between the recording studio and the silent meditation hall is only going to grow stronger.
It really makes you look at the concept of silence completely differently. It's not an absence of sound, it's the foundation of it. Which leaves me with one final thought for you to chew on today.
Right.
If world-class musicians, people whose entire livelihood, whose cultural identity, and whose massive success depend entirely on making noise, find their greatest inspiration and their deepest focus by sitting in absolute silence and simply observing reality, how much of your own best work or your own best self is currently being drowned out by the noise you haven't learned to quiet yet?